General Breedlove, I introduced you earlier in an earlier panel, so it's on to you.
Thanks, Bob. If needed be, we can interrupt and allow Yuriy to speak if he pops up. But in the meantime, it's my great honor and privilege to proceed on with this morning's panel. The second panel that I get to lead is Defense Sector Cooperation Priorities, Public and Private. I think this is a magnificent opportunity that we have today to talk about how our two nations interact in the defense sector and others in order to draw closer to one another in our common endeavors. We have 5 panelists today, 2 from the United States and 3 from Ukraine, who are completely well positioned to talk about these tough issues and to offer us their insights. I would remind the audience to be ready to plug in your questions and answers, and then we'll get these to the panelists at the end. First, we're going to hear from Yuriy Husyev, the CEO, the new CEO of Ukroboronprom. And we're excited to hear what he sees for that large company that means so much in this sector. Second, we'll hear from Beyer, an American CEO of AGIS Incorporated, who will bring us some thoughts in the sector that he's working, a really critical sector that could offer some real opportunity to us to work together. Third, we'll talk to Yulia, Vysotska, External Affairs Director, Ukraine's lead of defense companies, and hear what they have to say about the common opportunities. And then we'll have Charles, we call him CR Davis, Vice President of L3Harris International. CR is an accomplished retired senior officer in the United States Air Force, Lieutenant General retired, and led such big programs as the JSF for our nation. And then we'll close with Volodymyr Havrylov, advisor to the CEO of, and I'll murder this, I am so sorry, but Ukrspetsexport. And so we'll first ask Volodymyr to correct my pronunciation of the company, but we'll close with his thoughts. So before we go to our first speaker, just a reminder to our audience, begin to post your questions and answers so that I can have them arranged and ready for our speakers at the end. Yuriy, the floor is yours.
Dear General Breedlove, dear Robert McConnell, dear ladies and gentlemen, are you hear me? First of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event for this opportunity to participate in the discussion. It's a great honor for me to address you for many reasons. Recently, by the special decision of the President of Ukraine, I was appointed as a General Director, CEO of the state concern Ukroboronprom, which is key of the defense industry in Ukraine. The concern is a long-time partner of the United States. In fact, one of the members of Ukroboronprom Supervisory Board is Dr. Anthony Tetter, represents the United States. He assists us in implementation of the Ukroboronprom development strategy. He is a former director of DARPA. Actually, Valery Ivashchenko, which was announced as a speaker before, is a member of our supervisory board as well. And we have a lot of work to do together with our supervisory board, and we have a very clear strategy of the reform of Ukroboronprom for the future. Time does not stand still, and how we face not only new challenges but also new opportunities for fruitful cooperation with the United States. We do a lot inside Ukraine, in particular after my appointment as a CEO of Ukroboronprom. I already had meetings with the Prime Minister of Ukraine, the Secretary of National Security and Defense Council, and with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Strategic Industries of Ukraine, And I'd like to inform you that all participants on the same level with action plan of transformation of Ukroboronprom. The next step will be to submit this plan to the government and the National Security and Defense Council. In addition, we expect from the Ukrainian parliament to adopt a bill on reforming Ukroboronprom, which will provide opportunity and all the tools for the corporatization of the Ukroboronprom's enterprises, which are the key of this reform, which will open new financial markets and transfer of technology and new opportunities to deep our cooperation with U.S. companies and companies which want to cooperate with Ukrainian defense industry. The concept of Ukroboronprom transformation envisages that in 2021 the Ukroboronprom will transform to new structure with a few super holdings. There will be 65 enterprises left, and they will be divided into two holdings: Defense System of Ukraine and Aerospace Holding of Ukraine. Our companies must operate on the principles of corporate governance and transparency. Holdings will have supervisory boards. The introduction of an effective corporate governance system will help to avoid any corruption risks. You probably heard about Ukroboronprom in different corruption cases. That's why we must do this reform for the future of Ukrainian defense industry and for the efficiency of the state companies. This is extremely important for us. We clearly understand that otherwise we will not be able to attract international investment, and foreign partners will finally lose their interest in us. Based on the above, it is important for me today to establish direct relation with the American partners, participants of the conference and potential partners. It's important to demonstrate our transparency and readiness for dialogue. At the strategic level, our common goal is to expand cooperation with the United States in the area of high-tech products, including electronic warfare and air defense, and many other things which connect with new technology and new type of weapons. For the new type of wars include hybrid war. An important task we set ourselves is to restore the aviation industry of Ukraine. Therefore, we count on the participation of American partners in the program of import substitution of components and units, for example, for the Antonov 178 aircraft. Many items of American weapon and military equipment are already used in the armed forces of Ukraine. And I want to say our deep appreciation for the support from the United States to Ukraine from the 2014 till now. And we are looking for deep our cooperation in, first of all, in defense industry. And we would like to participate in its modernization and further improvement of different projects, include aircrafts and include different weapons and military equipment. At the end of my speech, I would like to thank you once again for the opportunity to share the views teams and mine about cooperation with the United States in such respectable audience. And I hope we will have many other reasons to present some achievements and result of reform of Ukroboronprom for our American partners. General, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Yuriy, thank you for your remarks. You've taken on a massive job, and we thank you for stepping up to the task. It's also interesting to hear your outline of what you're going to attack. And I'm sure that the audience will have questions about that later. But this splitting and this new emphasis on Arrow, I see that as an opportunity for us and our two nations to work together on that. And we completely embrace your continued focus on corruption and as you said, transparency, because this will be key, as you know, for U.S. interests and U.S. companies to come forward and embrace and try to work with you. So we wish you the very best of luck, and I'm sure we'll have some follow-on questions. Next, you're welcome, sir. Next, we have Cap Beyer, the CEO of AGIS Incorporated. Cap, over to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be a member of this select committee, and it's greatly appreciated. I'm the CEO of AGIS, Advanced Ground Information Systems. We were invited to speak about how our little company is very capable in command and control and knowledgeable in NATO and U.S. command and control systems. Because of the Russian invasion into Ukraine, the PEO U.S. Army EIS issued a contract for a large system to be installed in Kiev. That system has over 250 consoles, many rooms, and then they later modified the contract to include going down to lower level Ukraine brigades, battalions, and companies. I'm going to show you a video of the system that was delivered. It's 43 seconds long, so you'll get a concept of what Ukraine already has. Yes. I hope you can see it.
Сьогоднішній захід є особливий і визначальним у контексті створення якісно нової системи управління в Збройних силах України. Я впевнений в тому, що з впровадженням даної системи ми вийдемо на новий рівень організації управління військами та взаємосумісності із Збройними силами Сполучених Штатів та НАТО.
This assistance helps lay the groundwork for Ukraine's transformation to a NATO interoperable force, while also helping to ensure Ukrainian troops are better trained to face the challenges in the east of Ukraine.
Two things. Establishment of
This appeared on, I trust you all saw it, and this appeared on the Ukraine TV, but the most important part was not mentioned. And that is that we needed to provide Ukraine a means to support them with NATO air, ground, and sea, including the Black Sea, operability in advance of an actual war. So we have done that, and we have installed that in Ukraine with the ability to take the components of it to the various NATO command centers. This will enable US and Ukraine to try interoperability ahead of any actual conflict and avoids the issues associated with the approval of encryption. Next slide. you'll see a slide of how we do this. So at the lower part of the diagram, you can see the actual command center that is installed in Kyiv. And we created a data link that's used by the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Australia, and others called MDDL. And it encompasses the data link formats of other data links. So if I take in place and PC with MDDL communications in it and an Air Force Command Center in Europe, I can then hook it to link 16. We can send data from Ukraine to link 16 so that those aircraft see it. But data would not go back the other way unless there was conflict. The same exists with NATO naval forces using OTH Gold or NATO ground forces using NIFI. And it can also directly communicate with US ground forces using JVMF and COT. So using this methodology, we are able to, in advance of a conflict, establish interoperability between the participants. Go back. However, we've run into some issues. Those issues have to do with acceptance of the system by Ukraine. While it was accepted by the US personnel, the technical personnel assigned by the US Army, Ukraine has said that we require a certificate of security. We've not provided that certificate or how to pass it or even know of its existence for sure. We need help in obtaining that and working with the Ukraine company to establish this system that will benefit Ukraine and the US and NATO in time of conflict. We've also demonstrated the system to Ukraine's Navy and shown how it can be used to avoid RF targeting by Russia. We are very pleased to have been invited to this conference. And if anyone in Robert McConnell's extensive US or Ukraine community would like to explore ways we can partner with somebody to accomplish these goals, please do not hesitate to contact us and we will provide you complete information to the best of our ability, obviously not US classified, but we will provide you a copy of the unclassified software when we approve you, and we can provide you a copy of our web client without any approval. So thank you for your time, and I hope we're able to be of assistance to the Ukraine-US NATO effort.
Cap, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have more discussion about some of the key things you talked about. Interoperability is clearly a focus as we bring Ukrainian military forces closer and closer to us. I must just add a short comment here that what I saw when I visited Yavriv many times is hard work between our nations to try to make sure that we could accomplish that interoperability. And then secondarily, clearly, one of the big focuses of that interoperability is to establish a common operating picture. And I know that you have much to say about that. So thank you, sir, for your words. It's time now to move on to Yulia Vysotska and listen to the thoughts of Ukraine's League of Defense Companies. Yulia, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce the League first. Because I'm pretty sure that you know very well what is Ukroboronprom and state sub-industry, military industry in Ukraine. But during 6 years of war, we got also a private military industry here. And now there are more than 150 different companies, smaller or bigger, for different products, but we do exist. And what is very important, during the years of war, we put into service for our military more than 20 different products that are used on the battlefield every day. And what is probably also a figure that you will evaluate, at the moment, private companies cover more than 60% of state order of our country. So it means that probably we also have to be counted and measured. At the same time, you do understand pretty sure that everything we do on our own risk. We don't have any support by the state for different reasons, but we do. I will not stop now on such problems that we have in Ukraine, and you hear about this very often. I'm pretty sure that we need support, that we need advices, that we need consultancies, like that we don't have special financing or special credit persons for state order or for military industry for different needs. I'm pretty sure you know very well that we heritaged all the law from USSR, and we work on USSR law in the environment of market. Also, we need support from NATO, because we don't have laboratories and certificate centers that are accredited by the NATO standards. That's why we cannot approve the high quality of our products. We don't have in Ukraine the planning for we hope, we pray for 3 years, but better like in NATO countries to have it for 10 years. So we need your advices, we need your help, we need some support for export, because we have a very strong enemy on the export markets as well, and you know it for sure. But I would talk about one issue, not very popular to talk about. I've talked about the same conference, but alive in 2018 in Washington. That was also held by Ukrainian U.S. consul there, and also the representatives of Ukroboronprom were there. And what I want to stress about, if we talk that United States support Ukraine as a partner, let's say a smaller partner, strategically or tactically. Now we hear every year that we get from US a huge budget, huge support, huge amounts of money in military fields. But sometimes it comes with the products that we can produce ourselves. So my main idea, I will show you the example from real life. My main idea, and my colleagues from private sector, I'm pretty sure that Mr. Husyev will agree with me, that it's not difficult now to check and evaluate what was used by us during 6 years of war on the battlefield, and what was used from new products that were shown in their best ways, that products that were used in NATO studies successfully, and that we can produce by ourselves. So my concern, I'm not official, I'm only advisor to our Vice Prime Minister, Mr. Uruski, for strategic industries, but I'm only advisor, so I can say honestly, my concern is, please support us with the products, and there are a lot of that we cannot produce, and we will never produce. We are not able to produce. But in case you send us, for example, very short experience, you supplied us Humvees. My company, I don't mention the name, produces MRAPs, different types, like 4x4, 6x6, 8x8, and so on. And you supply us Humvees, they are for 5 people crew. Ukraine uses 10 people crew. So in this case, we need 2 drivers, twice repairing, service, and everything. So it's a little bit not cost effective, especially when we have too many different type of products for the same needs, for the same target. So in reality, it was done previously, but unfortunately is freezed now. Like we, for example, worked with DTRA. So it was technical support from US, and US government decided themselves whom to hire from American companies to buy the products from Ukrainian suppliers, military suppliers, to give it to our National Guards, Army, and so on. It depends. Or in other case, please support us with what we cannot produce. In this case, our own Ukrainian budget will go to our own Ukrainian military industry. So if you think about us, probably, I do hope, strategically, it's not the best way just to feed us. You cannot feed us all the time. Now we still have military industry. We have to, and it developed fine during these 6 years. Believe me, it is not difficult for you to make a research and to check it. So if you are not interested only to feed us all the time, help us to develop ourselves a little bit in what we can do already. Here is my main concern. Thank you.
Okay, Yulia, thank you very much. And these are familiar subjects to many of us, that we have a story. If you want to feed someone forever, if you give them a fish, you have to give them a fish every day. If you teach them to fish, they'll feed themselves. And so I know that's oversimplification of what you're saying, but we understand this. And frankly, I think this will be discussed more, and maybe even CR is going to talk about some of that in partner and sharing. I love your first set of questions, though, and I will misphrase you. Please forgive me, but I heard the question, are we partners? Are we strategic partners? And then how do we act as partners and strategic partners? And I think those are key thoughts that we'll have to move forward with. Next, I'd like to introduce a longtime friend, a fellow fighter pilot, and a great thinker, a man who has managed huge projects for our country. CR, the floor is over to you.
Sir, thank you very much. I appreciate those words. I want to first of all thank the U.S. Ukraine Foundation for this opportunity here. It's a great opportunity to share some thoughts with you, and certainly the Ukrainian Embassy. Just a quick brief commercial here. L3 Harris, 50,000 folks around the world with partners in 103 countries. And we've been, I would like to think, a partner of the Ukraine since the unrest started in Donbass in 2014 with supplying necessary communications, night vision equipment to the forces there. And we'd like to continue. I will pick up on a minute here on just what Yulia was talking about, but I want to start on the partnership thing. I'll call out General Breedlove here just a minute, at kind of as an example of how these strategic partnerships could go. He and I go back to pilot training at Williams Air Force Base many decades ago. I had the opportunity to spend 16 glorious days in China with General Breedlove as we did our senior service school, learning about that country that now plays very prominently in the world today. His wing at Luke Air Force Base requalified me in the F-16 just before I became the wing commander at Edwards Air Force Base. I enjoyed that time very much and miss every day of that. And then as he was vice chief of the Air Force, he kind of mentored me along the way as we were trying to bring some very complex networks into play for the Air Force. And then once again, here we are. But these enduring relationships that like that example with the countries, I think, are very important. And we as L3 Harris do not like to just come passing through, sell items and move on. We try to build that relationship. The relationship's important today when you consider the threat. As General Breedlove mentioned, a lot of our careers, we trained against the threat that now exists there today for Ukraine. I think Secretary Danilov mentioned that in the new security strategy that Russia, the Federation, was clearly identified as the threat, and it identified ways to fight it. And we'll talk about that as we go. But General Breedlove and I and others have studied that threat throughout our career, and it goes away and then it comes back. And then it'll be interesting to see how under our new administration within the United States, how that threat is treated. I think it'll be looked at a little bit differently than maybe it is today, but time will tell as we go forward on that. So if you look at a very short-sighted reactive threat, how can the partnership with the industry league, such as Yulia mentioned, how can we grow that? We realize that as the economies of the world are hit very hard today with the COVID, and everybody's trying to deal with the falls in their GDPs and to try to be able to protect their populations, we know that the economies across the world are suffering. So no longer do we see defense industry as just being something there to sell, to enhance an industry within the US and make a profit in a country around the world. We realize that it's got to be a very deep and enduring partnership, not only with the military there, but certainly with the industry. And more importantly, what we're seeing today is kind of what Julia mentioned with small and medium industries across the various countries that we work with are very important to bring into this because they have to grow. They have to become the defense industry of tomorrow. If you look at back to Secretary Danilov's discussion of the national security strategy and where we can help and how we can partner, he talked about what was important there was deterrence, resilience, and cooperation. And Ukraine has an interesting challenge, not only of growing their industry, but how they cooperate to grow that industry, not only with the EU, but with NATO, the European Atlantic Alliance. And then we know that there are certain countries that will pass through in a very opportunistic nature to probably take advantage of the situation. And so we like to work the partnership there simply because it is not passing through, it's not opportunistic, and we make it a permanent lasting thing to be able to help the country. There was other things that were identified that are going to be necessary for the Ukrainian nation to be able to resist its threats. And Cap kind of mentioned a couple of those things that he's having a challenge with of getting certification from. But we know cybersecurity is very important. We know cyber resilience is very important. Communications is important across all of the nations we work with. Not only that, but certainly intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance data. How we can bring that together to bear to support the Ukraine nation in a partnership is going to be important. And we know that capability must be well-defined and endured. There's gives and takes that must be made on the part of the nation and as part of industry to be able to make that happen. Industry, I think, across the US is very interested in trying to help meet the needs and meet the threats of a country like Ukraine by sharing technology, by helping develop manufacturing sources, by helping, if you will, as General Breedlove says, just don't give them a fish every day, but teach them how to fish, would do very well in terms of growing the economy and then helping fill a gap that the COVID situation has certainly driven into all of our countries. But it involves a long-term relationship. It involves a cooperative relationship. It involves partnerships. It involves joint ventures. It involves lasting structures that allow us to continue to support and grow the country and make it to our mutual benefit. And so I like the fact that we have such a broad array of expertise on the panel, from U.S. industry to the league to certainly Yuriy and the other companies that are represented here, so we can talk about doing that. So short answer for us is a company like us, L3Harris, we see us as probably the 6th largest defense contractor within the United States, is very interested in trying to grow those relationships and trying to help the economy and trying to help the partnership. And we're fortunate that we have such a wide range of products across our company, from radios to fully outfitted ISR capable airplanes that support some of the most complex missions the United States Air Force ever flies, that we have the ability to bring a range of solutions to whatever the problem is against whatever the threat is. So we're very excited to be able to continue that partnership that we started back in 2014. I know there's questions on the chat about the various security assistance funds and how that can be used to grow this. So I look forward to the discussion. I look forward to the opportunity. I certainly appreciate the partnership that our company's been able to have with Ukraine over these going on 8 years. And so thank you for the opportunity. John Breedlove, back to you.
Thanks, CR. A lot of themes there that I hope to pick up in the Q&A. A couple have already shown up. Let me again remind the audience, please forward your questions. We have several and I have several, so we'll get started here in a few minutes. Our final speaker today, Volodymyr Havrylov, advisor to the CEO of, and Volodymyr, I will leave it for you to pronounce the name of your country. Let me apologize profusely for my lack of ability in the Ukrainian language. So over to you, Volodymyr.
Thank you. I would like just to start with some information that I was a defense attaché of Ukraine in the United States during the war. So I was involved in all activities related to bilateral relation, including the defense industry, the technical assistance, all things related to financing. And so I know the specifics of that challenges. And I would like just to remind about the numbers. First of all, we have annual support, financial support for Ukrainian defense and security sector from United States, somewhere around $250 million annually. Most of the money comes for training. It's not for equipment. Only some part of this money comes for equipment. The budget, the defense budget of Ukraine for procurement is approximately $1 billion, only 4 times bigger than the US assistance. It means that given the ambition of the general staff of Ukraine to have many things, modern things in our inventory, we face the lack of resources to satisfy that ambition. That's first. The second, we don't have ability of our industrial defense sector to satisfy many sophisticated needs and requirements of our armed forces. And the third, we still don't have effectively implemented the long-term procurement planning in our military. It means that we can't give clear messages to the industry what we need in 2 years and 3 years for them to start some kind of plan. That issues we have as a challenges. It's a part of the state order, state defense order procedure. In this place, it's very important to have a very creative and very robust understanding in the general staff of Ukraine regarding the needs and requirements for the armed forces. So they have to move from the Soviet approach when they wanted many armored vehicles, many artillery, many heavy units, and to take into account the modern warfare, the modern experience, and trying to switch on some creativity and to find the methods and models of our warfare in the Ukrainian situation with the less resources, but using the most up-to-date systems. It means we have to introduce in our military, the lessons learned information system, just to use all lessons we've got from the operations in East and from other local conflicts in the world, and to see what modern and innovative approaches could be used with less resources, with limited resources we have in our situation. Then we have to keep in mind the financial constraints we have in our budget. So $1 billion for procurement. And it means that you have to be in contact interaction with the financial institutions in Ukraine to find the optimal solution for the defense, state defense order. Next, you have to work closely with the partners, of course, with United States and European Union, to see what technologies and what systems could be taken from them just to fill the niche where we can't to do it ourselves. And I totally agree with Julia. She mentioned that it's important to coordinate that kind of things with the US government. If there are ideas to supply something to Ukraine, it should correspond to our urgent needs. I mean, the needs we can't cover ourselves. We have a joint commission on a general staff level with our partners, which every year determines the critical needs to be covered by the foreign support assistance. But we have also to improve our internal processes and mechanism in general staff, first of all, to have very structured and very transparent process of formulation of needs and requirements for our armed forces. And the role and the place of United States in that is very important. First of all, we expect to continue the program of training of our specialists, especially in middle and high level officers in the United States, and to use them in the right way, not to waste time for their training and then are not used back in Ukraine, but to use them in the right positions in the general staff and the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. People with a new thinking, with lack of Soviet stereotypes, and which could be very crucial in reforms inside our armed forces. And that is a role, a very important role by the United States. And also we have to be in permanent dialogue, especially on political level, with regard to the issue of right people in the right position in Ukraine. People are the key reformers, not just ideas, not just like parties, people. So you can have just 5, 10 right guys on the high level in the general staff, the Minister of Defense, with English language, understanding more NATO and other countries' approaches to the defense planning. You immediately will see a number of changes in this regard. And that kind of message should permanently be present in our dialogue between the United States and the new administration, which is coming in force in the next 2 months. So I'm looking forward that there are great specialists in the U.S. I know them. Many of them will be back to the force, which will continue that permanent dialogue, sometimes maybe with the pressure, but with the pressure of the friend, to some decision makers here in Ukraine, to make very dramatic change in career management, in defense and security.
Драматичні зміни в кар'єрах менеджерів оборонної промисловості.
Okay, Volodymyr, thank you very much for your remarks. Volodymyr brought up an interesting question. He talked about the limitations in their budget to be able to invest in new kit and also then having to do training. This is a problem that defense departments and militaries have faced for all of time. It's nothing new. But I think that there is an interesting conversation inside this conversation. We like to say in America, and we're not always right, but we say that a capability is a combination of kit and training or readiness, meaning having equipment and being trained and ready on that equipment. But what is not often talked about is that next level of conversation is that there is equipment already in our militaries, some of it being older and some of it being newer, but we have to make decisions of, do we keep the older equipment ready or increase the older equipment's readiness, or do we buy new kit that is ready? And of course, we all fall back to some sort of blend of the two. We don't have enough money to buy all new kit, so we have to keep the kit that we have ready to have capability today. And then we have to have a strategy for how much of our budget are we going to expend on buying new equipment. And so I would just ask to our panelists, what are your thoughts on this? How does Ukraine look at the decisions of maintaining current equipment and versus buying new equipment? And I would really like on this answer to see, I see Yulia putting her hand up. I would also like to hear one of our American respondents to talk to it as well. Yulia, we'll go to you first.
Actually, it's something nearby what I was talking about. When me, myself personally had consultancies with the NATO representatives regarding how they treated our Ministry of Defense, in this issue. We need to plan our needs for 10 years, for example. And we need to plan our needs in people, in equipment, in airfield, in land field, what we need, what we want. We want, I don't know, 10 tanks, 50 RABs, and so on. Then we evaluate how much money we do have and what is much more reasonable for us. And that this topic is near what I was saying, that some simple issues regarding the support of US, some simple issues we can fulfill our needs cheaper and in this case more cost-effective way. Maybe it's not the last development, maybe it's not the best, but it can fulfill our need and target. And sometimes when you ask our generals, they want the best, but we don't have money for that, the budget. So we need to evaluate, like in at home, when you evaluate what you can adore yourself. So in these things, I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of NATO specialists in this field. I do know them, supervisors from NATO who came here when they were working with the reformation of our Ministry of Defense. They were treating them in this way. You have to evaluate what you can buy or what you can ask for from outside, or what you can evaluate and better buy inside the country, even if it is more simple. I don't know if it's not an answer to a question actually, because it needs deeper research and study to the target that you need to fulfill, and not to waste too much money, not to go with the water on a tank, not to carry water on a tank, let's say.
Yeah, you're actually getting into the discussion I think that needs to be had. We all know we have to invest in training and readiness because you have to have it. On the equipment side, as we say in America, the secret sauce is how much of one versus the other. I think in your country, and something you mentioned before, the refurbishment of some of the kit is something that could be done locally in a big way. We just need to make decisions about what are the things that we need to prioritize to do with the existing kit, and then how much is rolled into new investment. You know, in NATO, much is said about the 2%, that a nation should invest 2% of its GDP. But what people forget also is that the guidance says that 20% of that 2% should be invested in new equipment. This is to sustain the fleet. So what we need to do is inculcate this thinking, I believe, into our cooperation with each other about what then is that investment plan for Ukraine. I've interjected myself, I'm sorry. Do we have an American respondent that would like to talk to this question?
Beyer here. Yes, I would. It's an issue between what exists and what you want in the future. And we try to accommodate that by providing with our software 1 year's warranty at no cost. So for that 1 year, they get all updates and improvements, and will fix any reproducible problem. For Ukraine, that's been extended to 2 years. We're standing by to receive from Ukraine the improvements they would like to see during the second year of a warranty. So we try to get around that problem by constantly upgrading with corporate funds and with funds provided by people purchasing the software. I hope that answers your question from a software standpoint.
That's also very helpful. Thank you, sir. My second question goes out to primarily our Ukrainian friends. And this is based on some of the comments that the secretary made in our previous panel, when they talked about the new administration and what that would mean in Ukraine. And so the question is, how does this new administration change your approach? Or how do you expect that it will change the way you interact with America? And what would be the messages of friendship, partnership, as Yulia said, strategically? How can we get those messages back to Washington, D.C. to build these bridges that we need to build into the industries of Ukraine? So over to any of our Ukrainian responders.
Let me start, Mr. General. Actually, I was a deputy defense minister, and I had a chance to meet you, General, and to meet during 2015-2016 Vice President Biden in Ukraine, and we had many conversations about reforms and about movement for Ukraine, and we expect that we will deepen our cooperation with United States and NATO. We need for defense industries programs which will help us to get new technology and to have joint projects in defense industries for our domestic market and for international markets as well. And we have a huge potential. Let me back to your first question. We have a huge post-Soviet legacy, but we need to move forward and to have new technology, new type of weapons, because of new challenges and new type of war we have now in Ukraine, and new challenges we have globally. That's why I'm sure that we will have new opportunities to deepen our cooperation with concrete projects and with the concrete programs, include defense industries as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there other thoughts?
I would like just maybe to add something. We always had a great relations with U.S. military all these years. It doesn't matter what administration on the presidential level was. On political level, on the high level, during the Biden administration, there was a group of people in Department of Defense who are very dedicated to the mission of changing or assisting Ukraine with a change in the defense and security sector. And it means that they not only follow the current events in our military, they also provided a lot of advice and critics to the things which happened or maybe didn't happen in our defense and security sector. So they were a little bit passionate, or how passionate about the reform in Ukraine. During the Trump administration, I don't know if we had a very initiative groups of people in administration to do something more than was done. At the same time, we've got a lot of support from US, even last 2 years. As it was thanks to the military, to the people in the State Department, just to any ordinary normal official. So I expect that now maybe we will see some more interest, not only interest, but initiative in engaging in the process inside Ukraine to not only to assist, but also to encourage our leaders and our people for more fast changes in our reforms, not only defense and security sector. Thank you.
Cap or CR, before we move on, would you like to say anything? Yulia, I didn't see your hand up, so. CR,
This
you're
is Cap. Yes, I think the comments about the Black Sea are very pertinent. We, having met with the Ukraine Navy, we believe that it would be quite easy to incorporate their fleet into the command center in Kyiv, and to be able to have a common operational picture between them and the command center. This would also facilitate the ability to communicate with NATO when that is approved, so that there can be two-way communications and have a common operational picture and be able to direct forces efficiently and effectively.
Thanks,
Thank
Cap.
you.
CR, any thoughts?
May? By the way, the programs that I mentioned, like DTRA, technical support, it was in 14-15, then it finished. Only that times, US government, US embassy, and people who were involved understood that Ukrainian military industry, Ukrainian manufacturers can also be supportive as a suppliers in this technical support. So I do hope, I pretty do hope that the new administration will count this possibility. And maybe they will choose this way to cooperate with us as well. So I do hope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, sir, for the team, let me just say one thing. There's been a great discussion on the old versus new and the capabilities in the new administration. I go back to what Secretary Barrett talked about at the very beginning about a 50-year-old B-52 crossing the Polish border in Ukraine. And so the United States Air Force and some of the U.S. services have had that challenge forever. And Volodymyr mentioned trying to get new technology that's more efficient, costs less to operate. And I agree with all that. When you talk about the new administration, it seems like one thing they've come up with, if you look at our new potentially soon to be signed National Defense Authorization for 21, they asked that the U.S. Department of Defense provide a comprehensive capability of what capabilities Ukraine needs for the future. So we clearly have a tasking here to work jointly across not only the U.S., but across certainly Ukraine to come up with an answer to those questions. I mean, I think, all of the funding sources that we have out there, the USAI, the FMF, the 333 funds, everything are going to be tied to us collectively, military industry complex, U.S. and Ukraine, bringing back an answer to that question so that we can efficiently use those funds and hopefully keep those funds flowing to the really critical needs there. So I don't have an easy answer for that, whether it's this amount of training, this amount of kit, new, old, but we clearly have been tasked, I think, to be able to come up with an answer. What are the critical capabilities Ukraine needs, in what order, what's the priorities, and how do we help answer that question? So we have a challenge out there.
And the good news there, CR, is that there was some great work done by U.S. European Command that started all the way with my predecessor, Jim Stavridis, and then we carried it through my time as the SACEUR as well, where we did that deep study, and all of that work is still extant. So there are some things out there to guide us.
Good.
I want to get to one very specific question that came from the audience, and then I want to use another audience question to deepen this conversation we just had. So I'm going to read this question and then open it up to anybody on the panel to answer. The question says, should the U.S. financial assistance be used to support purchase of equipment produced by private defense industry sector for Ukraine's military? This would leverage the funds and supports Ukraine's ability to support not only its own requirements, but those of other nations in the region. Yulia, I think you actually have spoken to this already, so I'd like you to respond first, but then we'll allow the rest of the group to come along as well.
Thank you very much. Actually, it was my main idea that I wanted to highlight, because I'm pretty sure that probably we can use the funds more cost effective for maybe not only our country, but for neighboring ones. maybe we just need to calculate. I'm not talking about giving us money or more money. No. I'm just talking about calculation about cost effectiveness of this money usage. Thank you.
Dear General, I'm not agree. And I'm sure that corporatization of the enterprises of Ukroboronprom will bring new opportunities to cooperate with donors and partners in very efficient and transparent way, okay? And it will bring new opportunities for our domestic defense market and for international defense market as well. That's why I'm totally don't agree with that thesis.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure that may generate some thought. Is there anyone else that wants to remark on this before I go to the next question? Okay, the next question from the audience is actually a compliment to Volodymyr. But I will use that compliment to Volodymyr to open up a larger question. So the question says, several years ago, we had the pleasure of welcoming an official Ukroboronprom delegation and Volodymyr Havrylov in Rochester, New York, and Harris Corporation. May the partnership continue. So Volodymyr, you made a impression on someone. So I would like to use that remark to open this question up, and it goes back to the conversation we were in just a few minutes ago. So we realized that we need to begin to draw closer together. Everyone has talked about that, and we see the benefit of our industries growing closer together. The question really, though, is what are some concrete ideas? What are some things that we can put down that the Friends of Ukraine Network, that the U.S. Ukraine Foundation and others can help here in America to work on? Do you have some very concrete things that you might suggest? And I will open that up as well to all on the panel. Who would like, in the U.S. military, we say, who would like to drive on that grenade? Yulia, I see your hand up. Nope. Okay.
I think I said everything. And I didn't insist on support only private companies, Mr. Husyev. I was talking about buy also Ukrainian products, but not supplying only American ones, that we can do all together with yours altogether. By the way, to add, usually when we produce our Ukrainian products in different fields, for sure, we don't have the whole component base and parts produced locally in Ukraine. So in any case, we will have to buy a lot to produce our own Ukrainian made products, to buy from US, for example, as a parts and a components. It also can be understood as a cooperation in this field. Thank you.
Cap?
Well, I'm a Marine, so I'm going to jump on the grenade. The thing that I think could be most helpful is if we can establish an interrelationship between these Ukraine companies and L3 Harris and ourselves to work together so that any impediments are quickly overcome and we can provide the most efficient system most quickly. So that's in brief. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me, Volodymyr, would you like to go?
Yeah, just a couple of words on the topic. We need a kind of platform, as was mentioned in the previous comment, between the armed forces. It includes Ministry of Defense and General Staff of Ukraine, with the US defense industry to understand and to have very quick access, direct access of ideas and information from the US defense industry to the cabinets of our decision makers in General Staff and the Ministry of Defense. Just for them not looking for backdoor ways to deliver the ideas and proposals, but to have it very transparent and clear whom to address, or a kind of calendar of meetings. And for any companies, even small company from the United States could come there to present the idea and to get immediate kind of response. What kind of response, it doesn't matter, but immediate response. Because I witnessed a number of approaches from US companies, not big one. Harris is a corporation, so it's not a problem. But there are a number of small companies from the United States who were ready to provide some up-to-date, very sophisticated equipment, which was very necessary during our situation in Ukraine. They couldn't reach the right people in Kiev. So they, even after organizing direct conversations with some officials, it took after that many months for response or any kind of reaction. So I think the Friends of Ukraine network and platform like this can encourage and could encourage the creation or build up of the platform of communication between the defense and security sector of Ukraine and the defense industry of United States, and of course in other NATO countries. Thank you.
Let me put Bob on the spot just a little bit here. Bob, is there a role here for the AmCham, the American Chamber of Commerce?
Well, I think there is. Both the chamber, probably the chamber, and the U.S. Ukraine Business Council. Those are entities made up of business firms, corporations. They have access. They seem to have pretty good access to government officials and so forth to be able to express concerns and provide insight and suggestions on how to do things. I mean, certainly we're U.S. Ukraine Foundation is not a membership organization, but we do it as well. I mean, there are various organizations, those three, that if they hear the issues and so forth, have opportunities and chances to speak forward and pass it along and criticize and support.
I think maybe this is one of those things we could put on our little tasker and follow-up sheet for as a due out for our conference, Bob. Maybe follow on that.
Well, I would add, as most of the panel probably knows, the foundation has the Friends of Ukraine network, which is divided up into task forces and has over the years put forward recommendations both to the Ukrainian government, but most often to the U.S. government about how to support. And the task forces will be working now on some recommendations for the new administration and the 117th Congress. And these sort of things can be incorporated into it, because not only do they prepare the recommendations, the Friends of Ukraine Network, FOUN, then goes to office after office and not only presents them, but explains them and advocates for them.
Excellent, thanks. I'm just going to read the suggestion of one of our questions because it relates to what we're talking about here, and then I would open it up if anyone has any thoughts. The suggester says maybe a research and test lab in Ukraine to take advantage of rich Ukrainian intellectual energy as a resource, like the Russians have for years, for new innovative technologies with US funds could be stood up. So the suggestion is that maybe part of the US funding would go towards setting up this research and testing lab. Is there any remarks from the panel on that?
Just a quick comment on that. I go to kind of back to Julia's question on private industry and how it's tied to the security assistance funds. It's difficult for Congress to necessarily approve those funds to be released strictly to Ukrainian industry, but when the partnership is developed between U.S. and Ukrainian industry to produce a product that's needed there, or capability needed there, it makes it much easier for those funds to be tied to that. And you know, as a large company, I'm sure probably CAP has as well, we've looked for those opportunities to find true research and development capabilities to deliver a technology maybe that we don't have, or at least maybe help us produce a technology that's useful in Ukraine that may not necessarily be as easily exportable outside the US. And so that has presented us with both opportunities and challenges in the past. When we couldn't export something, we'd go to a lab, we'd go to a university, we'd go there and try to replicate what was needed to make the product or the capability. I think it was Secretary Danilov in the earlier panel said, we have clever engineers and technicians. And so sounds like something that you know, we need to continue to look for opportunities there. And that's something we don't often do very well, and we need help with as a large industry. Sometimes we'll think about, you know, what's the industry partner and what are we going to sell? We overlook that sometimes. So it's a good question.
Okay, I'm going to read this next question and again open it up.
General, can I say something?
Absolutely, Bob, go ahead.
You know, just in answer to the thing that you asked me about before, obviously this platform that we're using in today's session is unique, and we're feeling our way along, but we have the second edition of this is in mid-April. And aside from these panels we have, if you go in not as a participant, but as a registrant, you will see a lobby, you will see things you can tap, and you can go to an exhibition hall where a number of companies and entities have set up booths where participants and people coming to this conference can go in and explore what's there. I suggest that the companies in Ukraine think about getting a booth for the April session where you can set out a lot of what we're talking about, and there will be people coming in and chatting and so forth to learn about not only what you have, but what can be done and what they can be doing. I just take a look at the exhibition hall and think about April. That's all. Commercial ad over.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read the next question. It's really asking for a discussion, not a specific answer, but I think it's a good one. It says House Resolution 3147, introduced in the 116th Congress, would grant Ukraine non-NATO friend of the United States sort of status. That would allow Ukraine's defense industry to manufacture systems for US and NATO weapons support. And the questioner says this would seem to answer some of the needs and thoughts that we have been describing. And he asked for the panel's reaction. Anyone want to jump on that one? Okay, I don't see anybody really wanting to jump on that one. Let me just throw one. Okay, Volodymyr, you go ahead.
Just a short comment, because maybe it's not my subject, but of course the status that gives the opportunity for Ukraine to provide some services and equipment for NATO countries is very important, because it's an opportunity to supply equipment which is not requested by the state defense order of Ukraine. So we need to have markets for our equipment, especially for private industry, including the state-owned industry, and any opportunity to sell something useful to NATO countries and the United States, of course, it's very welcome. And as far as you know, we are on the way now with European Union, for example, not only with NATO. Recently, Ukraine got a special status with European Union military programs. So there is a niche in future for us. As well as with the United States, I hope we will have a kind of arrangement with more open access of our military equipment to U.S. market or U.S. strategic partners? Thank you.
So not to open a can of worms, but when I heard this question, I was thinking Motor Siege. You know, this is a company where we would like to not lose this technology and lose this capability to a competitor in the course of world events. And so my thought went to how do we bring that Motor Siege capability into the fold of the Western nations to bring things that we do need and to help us with those kinds of problems. Anyone to respond to that? Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. And I love it because it is a military question. So at Yavriv, what we have seen is incredible US and Ukraine military training, interaction, interoperability. We have seen our NATO partners come aboard and more 4 or 5 nations involved in interoperability and training. And we see that out of that, 2 things happens. One, the Ukrainian military is a better military and gains experience, training, etc. What we also see is that the nations of the West learn much from the Ukrainian soldiers who have been fighting on the line for years about Freudian slip, about Russian tactics, techniques, procedures, equipment, etc. So now the question is, how do we translate this kind of cooperation into the corporate world? Who wants to go first?
Dear General?
Yes, please.
May I share my thoughts? I guess we have to have joint projects in defense industries with NATO standards, with a joint vision for the future, with the new technologies. Let me compare joint exercises and courses, military courses, with joint projects in defense industries.
Thank you, Yuriy. Who else is next?
Sure, I'll throw out a thought on that. I mean, you bring up a good analogy back to joint exercises. One thing that we've tried to do in several segments of our company is to try to we will find the industries, or else we'll be introduced to the industries by an organization such as one of the ones represented here. Sit down for a couple of days, as Yuriy describes, and start looking, is there a joint project, a joint venture, or some type of technology we can pursue together. And I quite often find that after a couple of days of discussions, we end up with more opportunities to work together than we have time and energy to go do. But it requires a bit of investment of time and energy by the senior leaders within a company like ours, or another one, or within one in the Ukraine, to do that. But I've yet to see one of these events not pay off in some type of future opportunity where you just start sharing ideas. We don't have all the answers, and sometimes we think we do, and it is great to sit down and have these discussions when we can, but they have to happen. It doesn't happen naturally. You have to drive it or help drive it by some of the agencies.
And I think that's the main point I was searching for here, CR, is that this stuff is just not going to fall off the tree into our lap. We're going to have to cultivate this. We have to make decisions on both sides of the fence that we're going to make this happen. Yuriy talked about this when he very first spoke about how part of his job is to get back into the transparency business and to build assurances into American companies that Ukroboronprom can be a responsible, clear partner and encourage that growth. So you kind of got to exactly what I wanted to say, CR, and that is that this stuff is just not going to happen. we're going to have to pursue it to make it happen. There has to be dedicated engagement by U.S. companies. Cap's talked about things he's doing in Ukraine. You talked about the things, but we're going to have to continue to grow those sinews. I just point out that one of our responders popped up and said that Motorseek is actually presenting in the expo, and they want to find new markets, and they're reaching out. And so this is a place where maybe as we engage in Washington, we can continue to work that. Here's a question I think I can help answer, but I would like to hear industry answer it first. And I'm hoping I read this all correctly. The questioner says, my understanding is that while Ukraine can produce its own equipment, it can meet all NATO STANAGs to ensure interoperability. So the question then is primarily to our Ukrainian responders. Do you believe that you have the knowledge and the understanding of all the NATO requirements that you can build into that NATO interoperability into your products? And then I would ask the Americans to be able to respond. How could you help in that relationship? Yuriy, I see you want to answer first. You're ready.
Yeah, we not only believe, but we're sure that we could achieve success together with the implementation of NATO STANAGs and many other things to develop our defense industries and to develop new products.
Thank you, Yuriy. Who else would like to talk? Cap.
Well, there's not only the question of capability to produce, it's also a question of the nations deciding what they want to share for an encrypted data links. So we have an issue that needs to be addressed. We've tried to address it by enabling data to go one way from Ukraine to the US. But once you start talking about two-way, then you run into all sorts of encryption issues and classification issues that need to be addressed, and I would say gradually, not in one giant step. That's the limit of my comments, and we've worked this area for some time, but certainly don't have total solutions.
Let me add.
Please.
Thank you. We studied this issue very deep regarding the previous question and this one. I do agree with Mr. Husyev that we are pretty sure that in so many products we can be very competitive in regards to STANAGs. We now talk that they are obligatory in the world. But our previous president, Mr. Poroshenko, announced that we would have shifted to NATO standards in 2020. Hopefully we didn't, because STANAG standards, they are not only about management, they're also about technical standards that now we are talking about. The issue is that most of our products, we are really pretty sure they will complete STANAG technical requirements. They sometimes are not higher than USSR ones, but we don't, I say again, we don't have laboratory base for that. So for us to confirm our high quality, we have to go somewhere abroad. And we started this issue, and it's extremely expensive for us because it's no financial border. It's a technical border that keeps us. And we cannot assure and confirm our high quality as we don't have laboratories and certification centers and special equipment to evaluate our high quality in accordance to standard requirements.
Okay, thank you. That's a challenge. I mean, that's something
Yes.
that has to be addressed, and that actually takes investment, doesn't it?
Yes.
Investment that doesn't always pay off immediately, but it is a long-term investment, so it's a strategic bid. Okay, so we are coming close to the end of our time. Here's how I would like to end it. I have one more question slash statement, which I would like to throw out there, but I'm giving our panel this warning. In just a minute or two, we're going to come back to each of you for about 1 or 2 minutes, very short closing remarks to close off your thoughts after our conversations to today. And then I will keep us on time for closing up so that Bob doesn't fire me in the future. So prepare your remarks and we'll go in the order that we originally spoke this morning. So here is a statement more than a question for all of us. And anyone can respond a little if you would like, but I feel obligated to throw this out there. The questioner makes a statement and says that Motor Siege is a failure and worthy of direct commentary. How could the US and Western powers drop the ball so badly to allow this vital asset to be put at risk of transfer to China? And the responder also says, how could Ukraine be viewed as a reliable partner when its government has not come down harder to prevent this from happening? And pro-Russian oligarchs are seeing that pro-Russian oligarchs are openly working to promote transfer to China. So I'm not sure that we really want to dig this up, but I believe this is a bit of a commentary on both sides of the fence, that we need to work a little harder in cultivating these connections with America rather than be put at risk of some of these very important and delicate capabilities and industries to be lost. So rather than respond to that there, if any of you would like to add that to your closing round of comments, please do that. So to close our panel out today, we'll have a lightning round, 1 or 2 minutes comments each, and then I will close us out. Yuriy, you're first.
Dear General, dear panelists, dear participants, first of all, it's a huge pleasure for me to participate in this event, and I'd like to say that we have a strong will from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and we have a strong will from my team in the Ukroboronprom to transform Ukroboronprom to very efficient, transparent system of state defense industries in Ukraine. And we understand that we need not only a strong will, but we need knowledge, resources, and support from our strategic partners, and we are looking for deep our cooperation. We are open for this cooperation, and we understand that we together could achieve success, and we are looking for that success in the nearest future. Thank you for your attention to Ukroboronprom, and I wish all of you success.
Yuriy, very much thank you. Cap, you're up.
Well, first, it's an honor, a very big honor to be invited to this esteemed group of people. And we're a small firm, but very knowledgeable in command and control. We would like to work with the other members of this committee and want to figure out how we can improve Ukraine's interoperability with NATO and make it ready in case of there's a conflict to exchange data with US forces in a very timely manner and where the personnel have been trained on how to do that. So I thank you very much for this opportunity, and that's the end of my comments.
Excellent, Cap, thank you very much. Yulia, to you.
Thank you. First of all, I work for League for 4 years, and during all these 4 years, we feel all the time the support from American side. There were roundtables led by Chamber of Commerce of United States, for example, that were finalized, like liberalization for export for private companies. so many things between U.S. Ukraine Business Council and American Embassy. So thank you very much for support in different ways, not only by supporting us technically. And second thing, I would say that during last year with our new president and his new group, I can say honestly from private subsector that it's the first year when we were so deeply, usually every time involved in law writing, in different acts writing, in directions which have to be chosen. So not previous times we are like private companies were involved in our future life in military field. And in this case, I do believe that new administration of United States and the direction of our nowadays president and his group will build more deep, more tight relationships and understanding, first of all, between our countries. Thank you for this panel. Thank you for this meeting.
Thank you, Yulia. CR, my friend, over to you.
Yes, sir. These are my personal views, obviously not that of Elter here. So I'll say this. I do believe Ukraine lives in a neighborhood that's right next to what I think is the biggest threat to certainly the U.S. and to Ukraine and to NATO in some ways. And I know that's not shared by all, but so as a result of that, we're talking about trying to help Ukraine that's moving away from that world, is changing its industry, is changing how it operates. It's going to need help from obviously other parts of the military industrial complex, certainly within the US and UK and others, and everybody's expressed the willingness to do it. And like you said earlier, that's just going to take some work to do, but it's a cause worth investing our time and energy in. I think it will be of great benefit to not only NATO, but certainly Ukraine, US, and all the other partners involved. And Bob, to your point about these shows, we've done many of these now in this kind of this Zoom format, whether it's Air Force Association, Navy League, IDEX is going to be a mixed view of this, but this is kind of the new world we're looking at across the screen here. And your point about having an exhibition, all this virtual, it does work, it does pay off. And in some cases like this, I think you actually get a little bit better discussion. It's great to be there in person, but this is how we're going to live for a year or so to come, I think. So we'll have to take advantage of it and use it effectively. So thanks for the opportunity. General Breedlove, Bob, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Volodymyr.
Yeah, I also would like to thank you, thank organizers of the conference. It was very dynamic and presented with good experts and people. And I see it as a good example how to be in touch with the expert environment and decision makers in our countries to discuss the current status of events and problems. And just maybe too easy the job for the administrations to provide some kind of solutions for both sides. So great done, and especially on using this technology and electronic access to exhibition is something new. Thank you.
So before I turn it over to Bob, to the panelists, I thank you for a great conversation. I thank the audience for some tough but good questions. I think we got to the bottom of a lot of things and maybe made it a little clearer about how we can work together to engage our nation's industries for a better future for both the United States and Ukraine. Bob, over to you.
General, thank you. And thank you to all the panelists. I mean, this has been very, very good. And I remind you that not only is this panel, but the rest of the panels for the next 2 days, that program, our entire 2-day program, will be up and online for 3 months. So you can, if you haven't been able to today or you have others scheduled tomorrow, there are other panels that you might want to look at and hear from, and comment to us at the U.S. Ukraine Foundation ideas of future things and groups that we should put together and so forth, and be happy to work with you on that. The next panel, I note, is the Aerospace Sector Cooperation panel, and I'm going to sign off. You guys need to sign off because of our connection, but you might want to log in as a registrant and watch that.